In this week's video, I want to look into or explore a really peculiar state that I'm sure a lot of you have experienced when we are practicing Reiki or our own meditation practice, indeed, as well. Hands on healing, perhaps even yoga, right? And that is, what do we do when we start to channel, right? When we are starting to make connections to a realm beyond our realm, or beyond the veil, as it's so often called. Now, I'm sure this is going to look different for everybody, right? For me, sometimes it is a recognition of some sort of a being or a presence in my practice or with me in my practice. Sometimes that recognition of this being also comes with it quasi-telepathic and indeed sometimes auditory, or at least it seems audible instructions and directions and conversations and so on. I'm sure that will resonate with a lot of you. This is traditionally when people are saying that they're channeling from angels or that they're connected to deities and so on. And I want to explore both why that happens and, in my opinion, what we should do when these things are happening. So why is that happening? Well, again, this is just my opinion on it. I'd love to know what you think in the comments below of my opinion here, and hopefully maybe it raises some questions for you to look into your own practice. But Reiki is the energy of all things, right? And first and foremost, we don't even need to get attached to the phrase Reiki, right? Because that's putting it into a box. So you get universal energy, God, your spirit, whatever you want to call it, whatever resonates with you, that's what I'm talking about when I mean the energy of all things. And so if we are working to recognize or to come into a deeper recognition of the energy of all things, that means that the awareness of myself has to have diminished, right? Because the only thing that is keeping me from a separation between myself and this wall behind me, for instance, is the belief that I'm somehow different from that wall. Indeed, the wall and the stones in that wall are part of the energy of all things, as am I. So think about it like this. If you had a vast body of water, right? Let's say an entire planet-size body of water, and you picked up 2 cups of that water, 2 glasses filled of that water, right? And you poured them back in. So scoop it up, pour it out, and then you scoop it up again, right? Indeed, would you not be scooping up the exact same water yet again? On the second time, the third time, however many times you wanted to do that, you would be, because the body of water is one continuous thing, right? It is one universal expression of that energy, or one form of the expression of that energy, right? We find this a really convenient metaphor, I think, because our mind can quickly say, well, yeah, it's water. So it's not water and rocks or water and Bruce, it's water. So 2 glasses of water is 2 glasses of water. It doesn't really make any difference how many times you want to do that. I don't agree with that at a point, right? So if we can let go of the mind and the belief of the separation of things or the identity of things, right? Then we have to start to get to a point, at least at some point, where I recognize that I am the rock and the water and the air and the planet and the universe and so on. It's a tenet in a lot of religions, probably most notably in Buddhism, but this idea that we are of something greater than ourselves, right? Even in science, like I have a background in astronomy, it's something that I'm very passionate about. And one of the common discussions there that I think is quite an interesting philosophical discussion, at least at an entry level, is how we are made of the stars. So we are literally the stars in our body, right? I mean, the elements that are in us came from stars. So we are stars. That's where we came from, right? That means we came from the universe. So why is it that I think I'm Bruce and not a star? I'm made of a star. Is it because I have a belief that I'm somehow different? Right? So as we work to quiet that belief, then we start to move away from the idea of separation. And when we move away from that idea of separation, we start to get closer and closer to this veil, right? To this passage or a film, as it were, that we can transcend or move through, and we can witness something on the other side. Now, I'm careful here because I'm speaking in very vague terms because this is a very vague state to be in. To get there, this has to be quieter or hopefully silent. That's difficult, but quieter. The more quiet I am inside my mind and my body, the more close, or the closer, excuse me, that I'm going to be able to get to that veil, right? Hopefully I can move through it. When we start to approach that, we start to communicate with all things. We start to recognize a commune with all things. And that be deities, it could be animals, it could be past lives, ancestors, God, your higher self, whatever it is that you are in communication with at that moment, right? Now, this is a really beautiful place to be in. I don't want to downplay that in the slightest. It's a really beautiful place to be in. The tricky thing here, though, is, at least for me, and I bet for a lot of you, it's going to be very similar as well. When I'm there and when I have this connection and this awareness and this understanding that there's something else here, well, where is that understanding and that awareness taking place? It's taking place in my mind, full stop. There's no way to argue that. There's no counter to that. At least none that I've ever heard that will get me to think otherwise. If you have a counter to that, I would love to hear it. So let me know in the comments. But for me to recognize that I'm making a communication or a connection to something, that means my mind has to be understanding of that connection, right? And that in and of itself is not necessarily a problem. The problem is how quickly we then start to go into the world of belief and attachment, right? So we might start channeling something, and then we might start to interpret that as if I'm getting a download of something that is divine that I need to give to somebody else. I hear this in Reiki all the time. Plus, somebody's doing hands-on healing, they start to channel, or they believe that they're channeling from an angel, for instance, and they convey that message to the client, right? Now, it's a difficult spot here, right? Because the intentions are good, but it takes a mind to interpret that channeling. And then it takes the person's belief and ego to convey it to somebody else. What if that person's ego body or rational body is not ready to hear what you are going to convey to them or tell them? They're going to suffer, right? What if they are not open to hearing these things? They might be scared that you had some experience about their journey, right? Remember, everybody is on their own journey. The only person that can work on me is me, right? So I can be assisted by other people. Of course, people work on me all the time with Reiki and yoga and meditation, massage, all these types of things that help to move the flow of energy through my body. But I have to do the heavy lifting myself for myself. That's universal. Nobody can heal you except you, right? So when we start to channel and download these things or have these experiences, we have to be consciously aware and continuously aware of the traps here of the ego and of the mind. And in my opinion, we have to work then to constantly let go of these things, right? Because imagine that we are working with the energy of all things. And so what you might be downloading is part of the energy of all things, right? So you're either on this micro sliver, which is your channeling or your connection to a deity or whatever it might be in your practice, or you can supersede or try to go beyond that connection and then return to all things, to the energy of all things, the pulsation of all things, right? And so a question that I get then quite often is, well, what am I supposed to do? I channel and these images or these visions or these ideas are being given to me, and I feel like I need to convey that to the client, right? Or whatever your relationship might be, to the student if you're teaching them, or whatever it might be. My response, and this is just my belief, maybe it'll resonate with you, is when these things happen to me, I simply ask for my mind and my body to remain still, or as still as possible. And if anything is meant to be conveyed, may it be conveyed directly to the client, not to me, right? It's not my job to convey things that I may or may not have interpreted from the universe from a state of relatively obscure levels of purity. And what I mean by that is, let's say I'm completely out and I'm channeling divinely. Okay, this is a different conversation. I don't think people can do that because we constantly have our own ego, right? And if the response is, I can do that, or I know people who can do that, well, that's our ego. I can do that. Okay, well, then we're back into that state of delusion, right? And of attachment to the ego and so on. So when these things are coming to me and when these ideas are flowing and so on, it's simply, Bruce, try to stay stable, quiet, and calm. If this is indeed a message that is critically important for my client to hear, may that message be given to them directly. I am simply a conduit of Reiki. I am trying to remain still and quiet in my mind and in my body so that I can remain a pillar of support for this client as they move further on their own journey of their own healing, because they are doing the healing, not me, right? Nobody's doing the healing except the person on the table. Everybody else is helping to support that journey, right? So what do we do then? What do we do to progress when we are channeling? How can we go a step further? Well, we can do something similar to what I was saying. Try to remain still and calm when you connect to animals or to deities or to downloadable information or to colors or mandalas or images or past life experiences and so on, right? And indeed, isn't that what we want to do? Like, imagine, for instance, if you're sitting there and you're channeling and you're feeling all of this emotion come up, this heaviness, right? And then you're able to recognize that it's a past life. If you can remain calm and still and not attached to that story, then it will leave your system. Attachment pulls it back into the body, right? Stores it again. So we have more healing work to do until we can finally release it. Now, obviously, I'm not being so naive to think that we can just meet any experience that we have with that level of stillness. However, at some point, even the heaviest, most difficult experiences will be met with stillness at some point, right? I mean, they have to be, because at some point we're going to die. And that's like the ultimate point of stillness, right? After death. Well, then what are we then? All of our suffering, right? I'm obviously conscious that there's a lot to discuss here, so I don't want to go too far into it and I don't want to get too off track, but that's kind of like the ultimate test of our level of stillness, right, at that moment of death. And so we will have to face it at some point. And so when we're met with these things and we feel that kind of energy moving, or we feel that and we try to meet it with stillness, try to meet it with peace, try to meet it without attachment, right? Try to just simply sit with it. This is why Reiki is an internal, not external practice. It's why we bring everything inside, because the delusion of belief keeps us in the world of attachment, right? And suffering. Let go of all of the belief and return to the energy of all things. If you look, for instance, here's a great bit of evidence to support this. If you look at almost any seated Buddha statue, almost any of them, and take a look at their eyes, you'll notice that most of them, if not the vast, vast, vast majority of them, their eyes will be like a quarter open, right? Why is that? Their eyes are open like this to try to help us to remember that in meditation, we can get entrapped by our own beliefs of the supernatural, of the metaphysical, right? And when we get trapped by those beliefs, we're back in the state of the ego. So if we keep our eyes open, just a sliver, quarter, or 15%, or whatever it might be, with a neutral, forward looking, downward sloping gaze. So kind of, looking forward about, for my practice, it's something like maybe 2 meters or 1.5 meters in front of me, about 5 feet, something like that, sloping down to the ground at a very gentle. I'm not moving my head in a way that it's uncomfortable. I'm just looking kind of down and forward. If my gaze is kept there with my eyes slightly open, then it takes away a lot of the potentials to get entrapped by visions, by beliefs, by channeling, and so on, right? Again, I want to really be cautious here. I'm not saying that the channeling, I hope I've made this clear, the channeling is not a problem. It's really beautiful. Like, it's the basis of religion. It's the basis of love, and like how we can interpret that and so on. I just want to propose that there is one step further, right? If we can surrender even the need to channel, then we surrender and fall into the energy of all things. If we meet our practice with a need to connect and to channel and to, convey in these types of things, then we are meeting it from a more narrow framework or mindset, and we're meeting it from a mindset of belief, which can potentially lead to suffering. So if you can, when you channel, just simply float, just move with it, just flow with it, right? Just let it happen. If you find in your sessions, if this resonates with you and you're getting a lot of downloads or whatever, ask those to be given to the client directly, not to you. You're here to hold space, right? To me, that's part of doing our work honestly. All right, everybody, thanks so much. I hope you've enjoyed this video. And as always, if you have, I really appreciate a subscription to my channel. I release new content each and every Sunday that hopefully helps you with your own Reiki and holistic wellness practice. If you've had any interesting thoughts come up or anything that you would like to convey to me, please leave it in the comments section below and I'll be sure to reply. And I'll see you again each and every Sunday for my new videos. As always, everybody, thank you so much. Be well, and In Gassho to all.